Okay, so after Hurricane Helene occurred, many of us, including myself, made videos explaining that the government not only can, but the government does control the weather. And as the government's known to do, they mess things up and then they simply blame it on a mysterious thing called climate change.
How dare you?
Well, let me tell you something just really quick. Since 2010, I've been making videos explaining to people that they're spraying stuff in front of the sun that suddenly weaves itself together and blocks out the entire sun. That was 15 years ago. How could I come up with some sort of imaginary thing that suddenly seems to be true? And the government's own laws and patents are going to prove it. You need to watch this because they're lying about the biggest thing on earth, period.
And even more bizarre, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman from Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's got to stop.
This is a ridiculous claim on its face, and it's so easily disprovable, not Taj, of people openly discussing it for decades now.
The foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
The Air Force has gotten great value out of HAARP in the past. We took over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there and have finished our work that we're interested in doing up there. We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HAARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere, be able to actually control it.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection.
Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts.
Or declassified documents that talk about it, but simply by our nation's own laws, such as Public Law 94-490, otherwise known as the National Weather Modification Policy Act of 1976, which was passed October 13th of that year. The stated purpose of which, in part, is literally, quote, to develop practical methods and devices for weather modification. I mean, that's a law that was passed in this country. It was a program. I'm not even sure why we have to continue arguing about this at this point in 2024. It's not a theory. This isn't a crazy, kooky theory. It's a fact. It's on record. Perhaps Biden made such a provocative, contentious claim publicly just to take the focus away, even if briefly, from the growing tide of discontent.
Ridiculous. It's got to stop.
By means of cloud seeding, atmospheric scientists are trying to find out if rain can be brought on prematurely in the clouds of a threatening thunderstorm. If it can, it might also be possible to reduce the destructive lightning discharges at the height of the storm.
Would you stay on the field, please? Give us a field reading. We have personnel wandering around outside.
Records are kept of the frequency and types of lightning strokes of seeded and unseeded storms. Statistical analysis will tell if any significant modification has taken place.
That was a big one.
Investigating the detailed nature of such processes is the prelude to the possible control of some of the harmful aspects of the weather.
A little over a decade later, the U.S. military conducted experiments to bring weather to the battlefield. October 1966, the Vietnam War is in full swing. U.S. military scientists are devising a way to slow down enemy forces using the weather.
The U.S. had gone from advisor status to in-field combat status, and we're not doing well. As a result of not being able to make progress on the ground, the U.S. went to bringing the battle into the atmosphere above the battlefield.
The Air Force employed a groundbreaking military directive called Project Popeye.
Project Popeye was a weather modification program that involved cloud seeding, and the idea was to produce or exaggerate the monsoon rains that are traditional in that region.
The government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous.
How dare you?
Experiments are carried out beforehand with the military aircraft dropping silver iodide crystals in clouds over a strip of the Laos Panhandle, east of the Belovans Plateau in the Mekong River Valley. Experiments are carried out beforehand with the military aircraft dropping silver iodide crystals in clouds over a strip of the Laos Panhandle.
So, does that look familiar? This is from 1966. This is on the History Channel, and it's called Operation Popeye. It's the first time they used weather as a weapon way back in the 60s to wash out the Ho Chi Minh Trail, hopefully trying to disrupt their supply train. But they've had it. Lyndon B. Johnson talked about it 10 years prior, and then 10 years after the fact, we see it in an application in Vietnam. And they're still using it to this very day. Just like the laws that I showed you that they passed where countries are supposed to respect certain boundaries as opposed to not using the weather as a weapon to destroy them. But it is absolutely, without a doubt, a real event. Weather as a weapon is what they're calling climate change, and climate change is going to take away every freedom, everything you've ever had whatsoever at all. Between Davos, the World Economic Forum, World Health Organization. As a matter of fact, let's pop in real quick. Let's take a quick U-turn and listen to what just came out today.
We're undergoing a soft coup, and the idea is to create a whole new set of laws and ignore the existing human rights laws and other laws under the pretext of pandemic preparedness and the biosecurity agenda. The WHO is developing through all its nations, but with the WHO Directorate and the United States in charge, a pandemic treaty and amendments to the existing international health regulations that will remove the human rights protections currently embedded in the IHRs, will enforce surveillance, censorship, get rid of freedom of speech, require governments to censor and only push a single narrative. Also, we will be subject, if they can make this work, to vaccines developed in 100 days, which the organization 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗍 is planning to do. And one of the people who founded 𝗦𝗍𝗍 was 𝗢𝗰𝗍𝗿𝗍, who is now the chief scientist at the WHO, to bring this forward.
So did you just hear the representative from the World Health Organization? For the next pandemic they're going to conjure up, they're going to take away human rights. They're going to circumvent all the constitutions, all the written human rights, Bill of Rights. Every country, the World Health Organization is going to completely take over. Just like the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, who 2 years ago literally warned us that within 2 years there would be a cyber attack that would absolutely change everything, much worse than the COVID pandemic did. And then, lo and behold, 2 years after Klaus Schwab said that, this is what we're looking at right now, right this minute. So apparently, the 2024 Homeland Security Critical Infrastructure Conference was supposed to happen on November 6th and 7th, but due to misinformation, they had to bump it up. What am I talking about? Department of Homeland Security is doing a cybersecurity drill, a tabletop event on the 5th of November. On the 5th of November, these guys are going to do a tabletop drill on America being cyber attacked. Now, the last time we had a tabletop drill, it was called Event 201, and it was talking about a worldwide pandemic striking. And what Event 201's purpose was to deal with misinformation. Anybody that said anything other than what they were telling everybody was misinformation. 100% straight up, period. And that didn't work out so well because we all ended up getting locked down thanks to Bill and Melinda Gates, John Hopkins, World Economic Forum, World Health Organization. All these guys combined forces to shut down the United States and every other country. And many people didn't follow any of the protocols, and many people never once got any, not even a sniffle, not even a cough. Do you know what I mean? It just seemed like all the people that got their jabs and then their boosters got incredibly sick. Some had strokes, some had blood clots, and some died, sadly. But this is exactly what they did right before we had an enormous pandemic. And now on election day, they're literally going to do a tabletop drill on a cyber attack on America. Now, don't forget, this just happened yesterday. They're taking this stuff seriously on the November 5th tip. So 2 nights ago at the White House, this is what it looked like. And people that were pilots, ex-military, veterans, law enforcement, everybody that would know about this type of stuff said they have never seen such a thing. There were helicopters, Hueys, which are large troop transport helicopters, Black Hawks, C-130s coming in and doing drills at night in Washington, D.C. for quite a while. And it has to make you think of, it has to make you think of the law or the 28th Amendment to the Constitution that lawmakers are trying to pass, which they started doing 30 days before the end, the actual day of November 5th. The law that would allow them to replace half of Congress if there was a mass casualty event. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the new DoD, Department of Defense directive that was instituted on September 27, 2024, that now allows U.S. military to be used against American citizens, where they can use lethal force, including death or bodily injury. That's a big deal. But on that. Now, on top of that, all sorts of YouTubers like myself, YouTubers that are big in the law enforcement, military, gun community, were getting contacted by subscribers, quote unquote, that are actually in law enforcement and in the federal law enforcement field, saying that there are indeed terror cells in the United States that plan on doing a large event at the election. I mean, tie all of this together. Look at what's going on right now. How come we didn't have an outpouring of governmental support when the town of Asheville got washed away and turned into a wasteland? Because now it's a toxic wasteland. But I guess on that, I will digress. Let's get back to them controlling the weather. But be prepared, people, because these guys they lie to you. They lie to you. The government is controlled by things like Bilderberg, Davos, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, things to that effect. As you've already seen, the people that are in the political office are just puppets. They're just there to keep everybody placated, to keep everybody waiting. Another 4 years, we'll change it, we'll vote. And another 4 years, we'll change it, we'll vote. And the song remains the same. Nothing changes. You see what I'm saying? But as far as the weather, just like with Event 201 and the lockdowns and everything else, the number one player is Bill Gates. So when talking about Bill Gates, things like billionaires come to mind, correct? Well, like we've told people before, these 15 billionaires own America's news media companies. So basically, or entirely, everything you see and hear in music, news, media, television, everything is run by 15 billionaires. And you know what billionaires have? You know what the best interest of a billionaire is? It ain't you. It's in becoming the number one richest billionaire, one way or another. These people have been literally classified as psychopaths. They have psychopathic personalities, and a psychopath isn't somebody you want to be locked in a room or locked on a planet with. And sadly, we are. But bear in mind, every time you hear somebody like me showing you the patents, showing you their paperwork, showing you their own quotes, and then the media comes out and refutes everything I say, the media is following the exact breadcrumb trail left for them by the people that own the place where they work. Period.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
democratically controlled communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan community.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
Plaguing our country.
Plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
But Bill Gates has been at this for a long, long time. And his pals have been too. This is physics.org. This is a good website. This is from October 30th, 2024. They just finished telling you they don't control the weather. But their plans to cool the earth by blocking the sunlight are gaining momentum. But critical voices risk being excluded. These guys have been talking about this for as long as I've been researching this. And Bill Gates has always run the charge. He's always led the charge, I'm sorry. And it's not going to stop. The funny thing is they talk about they could use aerosol aerial injection, and they could use it to put carbon dust in the sky to block out the sun. Well, the funny thing is at my age, where I'm actually pushing 60, I've been on this earth quite a while, and that entire time I've been looking at the sky. And you see this picture right here? That's what the sky used to look like. This is what the sky looks like all the time now.
That's what it looks like when you spray barium, strontium, aluminum into the sky and then hit it with the NEXRAD radars or Doppler radars, which is running frequencies through it. And right now this is doing something called cymatics. And you can look. You can look that up, how radio frequency can affect water, sand, anything, and make it look like whatever you want. They've been doing this a long time, guys, a long, long time. Let me ask you something. If geoengineering wasn't real, how was I already knowing it 15 years ago before it was fashionable? Because I did, and I've got the receipts.
So back in 2017, I had my aha moment where Harvard University decided to put up this website. And I was positive that once this website was up, that people would see the light. Because Harvard was talking about everything that I was ever talking about, except I couldn't put names to it. All I knew is that they were spraying stuff out of the back of airplanes. Every single day, they would cross over. Instead of the stuff coming out of the planes dissipating under the heat of the sun, they did the exact opposite. It worked like a two-part epoxy. They would form together and create a blanket in front of the sun, completely blocking the sun. And then Harvard came out with this site, and I thought everybody would finally get it. Now, thanks to myself and many others, this website has changed a lot. There's a fellow named Dr. David Keith, and he's worked closely with Bill Gates. The website isn't as good as it used to be whatsoever at all. It used to basically point out all the facts, but now it doesn't. It kind of sugarcoats it a little bit. But here's the deal. They can control the weather. They can control the weather. They can control the weather. I don't know how else to possibly say it. You know what I'm saying? Weather is a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, put out in 1996. I was positive it was 97, but it's not. But if you read through this, they explain how using the weather, why would we want to mess with the weather? What do we mean by weather modification? The Global Weather Network, applying weather modification to military operations, precipitation, fog, storms, They're not just simply seeding clouds to help it rain over the poor farmer's field, because when they're messing with the weather, what they're doing is gathering the weather from one location and bringing it to where they want. But what that does is it leaves the natural weather, it's not doing its job anymore. Do you see what I'm saying? And these guys are doing some seriously crazy stuff. They deny it, and yet the History Channel did a special on how they used weather modification to wash out the Ho Chi Minh Trail back in 1966. LBJ came out in 50-something, and said that owning the weather is a weapon. Whoever controls the weather controls the world. I thought when this stuff came out, everybody would see it for what it exactly is. We just saw them use this not only in the north, the southeast, we also just saw them use it out in Roswell, New Mexico, where they just basically conjured up a storm and washed that place out. You don't get rain and floods like that in the high desert. They just label everything a 100-year storm, 1,000-year storm. And then, of course, they call everything climate change. And you have to change everything about your life. You have to stop eating meat. You have to stop driving a vehicle. You have to stop living your life. And you got to stop those damn cows from farting, because Bill Gates is very, very concerned about that. The other thing Bill Gates is very concerned about is all the idiots out there that think that somehow if there's too much CO2 in the atmosphere, planting more trees will help it. I mean, that's just crazy talk. That's misinformation. It's disinformation. You know what? Actually, it's a conspiracy theory.
I don't use some of the less proven approaches.
Such as?
I don't plant trees.
There's a lot of people who are very enamored with trees. We've got trees on this stage. Some people would even say that if you just planted enough trees, it could take care of the climate issue altogether.
And that's complete nonsense.
Okay.
I mean, are we the science people or are we the idiots? Which one do we want to be?
We the idiots.
How dare you?
So yeah, planting trees is for idiots, but building these ginormous metal contraptions that do the same exact things as trees is perfectly sound. Let me explain something to you. Maybe you're younger. I recently watched all 5 of Bill Gates' episodes on Netflix, and I heard some young fella say something that it just didn't dawn on me. He said, my entire lifetime, the climate change crisis has been the top priority. Well, he's only been alive 20 years, but they've been preaching this for 20 years. Let me show you something that every 5th grader used to learn in science class, and it still stands 100% true to this very day. It's a crazy conspiracy theory called photosynthesis. Humans exhale CO2, trees inhale CO2, trees exhale O2, humans inhale O2. That's called the circle of life. That's called God's design. Bill Gates is not God. He's quite the opposite. But here, for those that don't know what photosynthesis is, it's this. It's pretty straightforward.
What is photosynthesis? Without photosynthesis, there would probably be no life on Earth. Photosynthesis is the process in which green plants, water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight turn into oxygen and carbohydrates, sugar. Living creatures need carbohydrates to fuel our body and oxygen to breathe. Photosynthesis happens inside the chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are the small structures that give the plant the green color. There are about 10 to 20 of these in every plant cell. Inside the chloroplasts are these stacks of little sacs with green stuff inside. Each of the sacs is called a thylakoid. Outside of the sac is called a membrane, and the inside is filled with chlorophyll. Photosynthesis happens in 2 stages: the light-dependent reaction and the light-independent reaction, also called the Calvin cycle. The light-dependent reaction happens in the thylakoid membrane. The light-independent reaction, Calvin cycle, takes place in the empty space within the chloroplast, the stroma. This is the formula. So 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 6 water molecules, and sunlight makes 6 oxygen and 1 carbohydrate, sugar. Starting with a light-dependent reaction, sunlight travels from the sun onto the earth, through the leaf, through the chloroplast, into the thylakoid. Energy from the sun is called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. While the sunlight comes in, water is also being transported into the chloroplast. ATP splits the water, H2O, into H and 2O, hydrogen and oxygen. In this process, oxygen gets released into the atmosphere. The chemicals NADPH, NADP plus hydrogen, leave the thylakoid and get into the stroma, which is where the Calvin cycle happens. The CO2 from the atmosphere forms a line of 6 carbons. The chemical NADPH with the ATP combine the CO2 with hydrogen, giving us the last part of the molecule, 6O2 plus C6H12O6. We have carbohydrates, which the plant uses to grow, which animals eat, who then breathe out some more CO2.
So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. If you're having some sort of a crisis, a climate change crisis, and you're going to blame it on CO2, planting more trees would absolutely solve the entire issue, but that's not what we do in this world. We take down trees and we put up factories so that billionaires can make more billions. Do you see what I'm saying? And I know you know this. This is pretty standard. It's pretty straightforward. These guys, like I said, Harvard University and Bill Gates, they want to propose decreasing sunlight that could cool the planet. That's why Bill Gates is trying to block the sun's rays. This isn't a misinformation or disinformation. This has been going on for a long time. And exactly the exact method they described that they would, quote unquote, technically use is what you can see with your own eyes if you actually stop looking at your cell phone and look up at the sky. Some days it's a clear day, but that doesn't last very long because they show up and they start spraying and spraying and spraying. Photosynthesis does not work. Photosynthesis requires the sun, it requires trees, and it requires humans. It does not require Bill Gates, a guy that still hasn't figured out how to make Windows 11 work yet. And yet suddenly he's modifying mosquitoes and he's blocking out the sun and he's doing basically whatever he wants. And people don't say anything because he's a billionaire. It's just an amazing thing to me. I don't know how much more proof people could possibly require. Owning the weather in 2025. Well, what time is it right now? Well, it's 10:30, 2024. They're way ahead of schedule, and I said that several years ago. But I'll leave links so you can read all this yourself. This is their paperwork. This isn't misinformation or disinformation. They are lying to you. They're lying to you all the time. They always lie to you. I don't understand how that's even in dispute. All they do is lie, and they leave office multitudes richer than when they entered office. How does that work as a public service? Well, it doesn't. It doesn't, because they're not public servants. They're puppets put in place, allowed to become wealthy as long as they keep the masses placated. My bad. That's exactly what they do. The patents for weather modification go on and on and on, and I know. Why listen to someone that's actually showing you the proof that you can go look up for yourself? Look up the patent numbers. Look up the years they were instituted. Look up all the figures, leaders in the United States that have actually talked about this like it was no big deal until it caught fire. No pun intended. Until they started using it against the American people. Okay? It's just all right here. All right here. And I want to get this video out as soon as possible because when I hear the DHS is drilling for a cyber attack, that's kind of a hint because they've given us a lot of hints over the time period of 2024. They're going to take the country down. They're going to shut off the communications. They're going to shut down the electricity, and they're going to blame it on hackers, and they're going to let us all fend for ourselves. All the while, they now have the ability to fire on American citizens with impunity. Not a big deal. Also, not misinformation. This is from the DoD's website, Directive 5240.01. Active on the 27th, 2024. Why would this suddenly need to be instituted after 143 years of posse comitatus protecting American citizens from officials putting military on the street and allowing them to fire on civilians? Well, because they're getting ready to do this. And if you want to just keep your head buried in the sand, have at it. But they're not messing around. Not only are they passing the directives, they're also practicing, just like they were in Washington the other night. Richie from Boston. Share this or don't. Links will be below. Research it yourself, but I'll tell you what. Time is ticking. November 5th is coming up. And this is going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to this country, in my opinion. I'm out.